Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone underestimated your absence, like they assumed you'd always be there, waiting in the wings, a constant they could return to whenever life got quiet? It's a painful irony of life. The people we give the most to often believe will keep showing up no matter how they treat us. They think love is loyalty without boundaries, presence without purpose. But what if that belief is a lie? What if the real power lies not in chasing, pleading, or proving, but in silence, in absence, in acting like they never existed? Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Yet this may be the most liberating truth you'll ever uncover. Let's challenge a common misconception that detaching means weakness or indifference means you never cared. This is one of the biggest lies we've been told. That in order to be healed, we must be heard, that to find closure, we need an ending shaped by both sides. But the reality is this: in Stoicism, true strength is not found in external validation, but in internal clarity. And sometimes the most powerful act of self-respect is erasing someone so completely from your life that they are forced to confront the vacuum they created. You don't erase them because you're bitter. You do it because you're better. You see, people tend to scream loudest when they feel unseen. They expect you to react, to reach out, to prove your worth just one more time. But what happens when you don't, when you go quiet? When you walk away with dignity unshaken and refuse to entertain the drama? That's when the shift begins. That's when they panic, because they assumed they were unforgettable. They assumed your world would stop spinning in their absence. But it didn't. It won't. It never needed to. This article is not just another echo of revenge stories or vague motivational advice. This is the kind of mindset reset that Stoic relationships require, not based on manipulation or games, but on reclaiming your self-worth through presence, purpose, and personal growth. It's for those tired of repeating emotional cycles, for those ready to break free and rise without needing applause. It's for you, and I promise you this: by the end, you'll not only understand why acting like they never existed changes the dynamic forever, but you'll feel it in your bones. You'll begin to see how their silence isn't the punishment, your absence is. You'll discover how every part of you they once took for granted becomes the lesson they never forget. Stay with me. Because what comes next isn't just insight, it's transformation. What's the cost of clinging to someone who walked away? And what's the reward of becoming someone they can never reach again? Let's begin. 1. The power of indifference, turning silence into strength. There's a moment in every Stoic journey where the silence you once feared becomes your greatest strength, where your refusal to react, to respond, to run back, transforms from what felt like passivity into the fiercest display of inner control. It begins subtly, often in the stillness of your thoughts, when you stop checking your phone for a message that never comes, when you no longer feel the sting in your chest every time their name flashes across your memory. At first, it may feel unnatural to not respond, to not justify, to not scream into the void that you were the one who gave everything. But here's the Stoic truth: the loudest statement you can ever make is complete indifference. Indifference doesn't mean you never cared. It means you have reclaimed control over who gets access to your emotional world. Ask yourself, who are you giving your energy to? Is it someone who's earned the right to shape your mood, to rattle your peace, to live rent-free in the most sacred part of your existence, your mind? Too often we become entangled in emotional power plays, convinced that we must show someone our hurt in order to gain their respect or regret. But what if the real revolution begins the moment you decide that their validation isn't currency you deal in anymore? What if, in not caring whether they regret their decision, you finally set yourself free from the loop of needing to be remembered, seen, or missed? That is where Stoicism lives. in the space between stimulus and response, where silence becomes your reply and your absence becomes your message. Think about it. How many times have you tried to prove your worth to someone who couldn't even see it? How many nights did you lie awake wondering what you did wrong, how you could have been clearer, kinder, softer, more patient? And for what? For someone who believed your love was infinite and your presence was guaranteed. This is the shift. The moment you decide that your value doesn't decrease based on someone else's inability to recognize it. When you choose not to explain yourself, not to beg, not to chase, you become untouchable. Not because you're heartless, but because you finally understand the difference between being emotionally open and being emotionally available to those who misuse your vulnerability. The ones who once made you question your worth will find themselves in a storm of silence, trying to decode the meaning of your stillness. They'll wonder if you're angry, if you're hurting, if you're still waiting. But they'll never know because you've stepped into a new frequency where their noise doesn't reach you anymore. That's the beauty of Stoicism. It teaches you to remain unmoved in the face of manipulation, to remain anchored when others try to unsteady you with their confusion, their games, their need for control. Your indifference is not spite. It is self-preservation wrapped in strength. It is the discipline of choosing peace over explanation, solitude over chaos, and growth over validation. Imagine being the calm in someone else's storm, the presence that used to be filled with warmth and access, now replaced by distance and quiet resolve. They won't tell you this, but your silence will echo louder than any words you could have spoken. Every time they expect you to reach out and you don't, every time they test the waters and you remain still, they are learning the power of losing access to someone who was once all in. And here's the most stoic part. You're not doing it to hurt them, you're doing it to heal you. Because clinging to people who treat you like you're optional is emotional self-destruction. And stoic relationships are built not on how tightly you hold on, but how wisely you let go. Consider this. When you act like they never existed, what changes? You stop waiting for closure. You stop trying to decode mixed signals. You stop letting someone's absence define your narrative. And suddenly, the focus shifts from them to you, from what they did to how you rise, from the ending they gave you to the beginning you create for yourself. This isn't about pretending. This is about positioning. You're positioning yourself in a life where your peace is not up for negotiation, where your dignity is not a bargaining chip, where your energy is no longer siphoned by those who can't reciprocate what you naturally give. That's what indifference gives you: space. Space to grow, to reflect, to rebuild. Space to become someone whose silence is not emptiness but elevation. They might not feel it now, but over time, your indifference will be the weight they carry, because it symbolizes what they lost when they assumed you'd always be there. And no matter how many temporary people they surround themselves with, no matter how many distractions they chase, there will come a moment when the noise fades and the truth returns. You're not chasing them anymore. You're not waiting. You're not hoping. You've moved into a new realm where their opinion no longer shapes your sense of self. That's stoicism in motion. The embodiment of power not through dominance, but through detachment. You see, stoicism doesn't teach you to feel less. It teaches you to feel wisely, to reserve your emotions for those who earn them, to be generous with love but guarded with access. And when someone loses that access, the silence becomes their teacher. The void becomes their mirror. They thought they were in control, but now they're learning. The one who walks away in silence is often the one who wins, because the game they thought they were playing ends the moment you stop playing along. You are no longer a participant in their drama. You are no longer the safety net for their indecision. You have become the one thing they never expected: free. And freedom is terrifying to those who rely on your dependency to feel powerful. You no longer feed their ego. You no longer validate their actions. You've removed yourself so fully that the only way they know you still exist is by the absence they feel every time they look back and find nothing. No message, no reaction, no trace of the person they once took for granted. And that is your greatest power move. Not because you're trying to prove anything to them, but because you've finally proven everything to yourself. You've chosen to be the one who doesn't need to be heard to be felt, the one who doesn't scream to be remembered, the one who walks away with grace and never looks back. That's the quiet storm Stoicism cultivates. That's the kind of person Stoic relationships demand, someone who knows that the right people don't need to be chased and the wrong ones don't deserve to be explained to. And if you're wondering what happens next, what becomes of the ones who expected you to shatter in their absence, just wait. Wait and see what silence does to a person who once thrived off your attention. Wait and see how the quiet drives them mad, how your indifference becomes a void they can't fill. They will try to recreate what you gave. They will search for your spirit in people who are hollow copies, but they will never find it because you weren't just present, you were real, and real can't be replaced. That's what indifference teaches them. That's what Stoicism engraves into your soul. You never needed closure. You never needed to be seen to know your value. You just needed to stop handing your power to people who wouldn't even hold your heart with care. So now you become the mystery, the echo, the silence they can't decode. And from that space you rise, unbothered, undeterred, unbreakable. 2. Detachment as a power move, erasing them from your energy. Detachment isn't about bitterness, it's about boundaries. It's the shift from obsession to observation, from reactivity to reason. When you make the decision to erase someone from your energy, you're not pretending they never mattered. You're realizing that who they are now no longer aligns with who you are becoming. And that realization, though it may arrive quietly, alters everything. Think about it. How many times have you carried the weight of a relationship long after the person was gone? How often have you replayed conversations, relived memories, tried to rewrite endings that were never yours to control? Detachment breaks that loop. It teaches you that healing isn't about holding on. It's about letting go with discipline and grace. In Stoicism, we learn that the only thing we can truly command is our own mind, our own reactions, our own energy. So why do we allow others to dictate our emotional climate? Why give that power away so freely to people who have shown us, through action, through absence, that they do not respect it? When you choose to erase them from your energy field, you're not denying the past. You're setting the tone for your future. You're declaring that your presence is sacred and that not everyone gets to orbit your universe once they've chosen to walk away from it. This isn't a performance. You're not acting like they never existed to manipulate. You are choosing emotional minimalism. You're decluttering your soul. And when that clutter is gone, you breathe different. You move different. The old you might have begged for clarity, written paragraphs to explain how much you cared, twisted yourself into knots hoping they'd finally understand. But the new you, the stoic you don't need to be understood anymore. You need to be at peace. There's no need to broadcast your transformation. Your silence will reveal it. Your calm will confirm it. You become the absence they didn't plan for, the stillness they underestimated. And slowly, inevitably, they start to feel it. They begin to wonder why the grip they once had feels loose, why their name no longer commands the same emotional response from you. They might test the waters, drop casual messages, post photos with curated smiles and filtered distractions. But you're not watching anymore. You've pulled your energy back, not out of malice, but out of mastery. And mastery means you no longer allow their presence to pull you off center. You've erased them not to harm them, but to honor you. There's a profound shift that happens when you stop making space for someone who clearly made a choice to leave. You no longer sit in the shadows of what if. You no longer check timestamps or read into silences. You've come to understand that some endings don't need a conversation, they need a conclusion. Detachment isn't cold, it's clean. It's a kind of inner stillness that says, I wish you well, but I wish myself better. And better means no longer leaking your light into someone who used your love as a convenience. In Stoic relationships, detachment is the firewall that protects your peace. It's the decision to stop feeding a bond that only takes and never returns. It's clarity disguised as distance. They may feel that shift, but they won't always know what changed. They won't realize that the version of you they once knew, the one who overextended, who overexplained, is gone, vanished not in bitterness, but in the brilliance of rebirth. And when they look back, they'll find no access point, no thread to pull you back in. That's what makes detachment a power move. It gives you the upper hand without ever having to lift a finger, because the person who can walk away without needing closure is the one who's already found it within themselves. You didn't need their apology to heal. You needed your own permission to stop bleeding, and now that you've given it, your peace becomes unshakable. You start showing up differently in the world. Your eyes don't scan for them in crowds anymore. Your heart doesn't ache when their song plays. Your timeline, your thoughts, your energy, they're all yours again. No trace of them lingers, because you finally understood the truth. You never had to erase them from the world. You only needed to erase them from within you. And that, my friend, is liberation. That is where the Stoicism becomes practical. It's not just a philosophy, it's a way of being, a way of walking through the world with composure, of loving with intention and letting go without resentment. Some will see your detachment and call it heartless. But let them. They don't. Know the war you fought just to stand here whole. They didn't see the tears you silenced, the nights you questioned your worth, the strength it took to not reply, to not reach out, to not relive. You've done the work, and now they get to do theirs. Let them feel the void. Let them question the silence. Let them chase the version of you that only ever existed in their access. You're not obligated to open the door again. In fact, closing it was the kindest thing you could have done for both of you, because in detaching, you didn't just choose peace, you chose evolution. And the most powerful version of you is born in the quiet. It's born in the decision not to return to the place that drained you. It's born in the stillness that follows the storm. You are no longer who you were when they left, and they are no longer welcome in the life you've created from the ashes. If this part of the journey resonated with you, like the video and comment number 1 below to claim your space in this transformation. And if you're ready to step into more stoic strength, subscribe now, because the next phase of this journey will take you even deeper into the freedom you've always deserved. 3. The ghost they can't escape. You become a ghost, not when you vanish from their world physically, but when you no longer occupy the emotional space they assumed you'd always fill. There's something haunting about presence that lingers in the absence, something unnerving. But realizing that someone you once took for granted has dissolved into stillness, not gone, but unreachable. You see, most people aren't afraid of losing others. They're afraid of realizing too late that the person they lost cannot be retrieved. That's what you've become. Not a memory they can dust off when convenient. Not a chapter they can revisit when nostalgia creeps in. You're a haunting, silent, spectral, persistent. You don't scream, you echo, you don't beg to be seen. You appear in the corners of their mind, in the edges of their routine, in the places where comfort once existed, but now only whispers remain. And what makes you truly unshakable is that you've left no door open behind you. You didn't just walk away, you evaporated from the narrative. You removed your energy so completely that there's no longer a thread for them to pull, no loose end to tie up, no apology that could rethread the connection. You're not pretending to be gone. you are gone. And in Stoic relationships, that kind of erasure isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You chose not to haunt them out of vengeance, but because you've outgrown the space where they once kept you. They may still walk the same streets, scroll through old messages, catch glimpses of you in strangers, but every reminder now leads to silence, and silence is the only thing that cannot be argued with. It's definitive. It forces them to confront the void they never imagined you'd become, because in the beginning, they believed you'd always be within reach. They believed that even if they left, you'd wait. Even if they drifted, you'd anchor. But the ghost they now chase isn't the you that waited. It's the you that transformed the moment you stopped. You stopped explaining. You stopped reacting. You stopped holding space. And in that stillness, you became immortal. Not in a romanticized way, but in a psychological one. Their mind keeps returning to what they can't resolve. Their heart keeps searching for what no longer responds. That's the paradox of loss. They didn't realize what you meant until you were no longer emotionally accessible. And no matter how much they try to rationalize your absence, no logic can erase the emotional imprint you left behind. You are the void they can't fill with new faces. You are the standard they now unconsciously measure everyone else against. And not because you were perfect, but because you were present, because you were real, because what you gave was sincere, unfiltered, unrepeatable. In Stoicism, we don't seek revenge or retribution. We allow time to reveal what words cannot. And right now, time is doing its work. It's unraveling their assumptions. It's whispering to them at night in the quiet, in the spaces that once felt safe. They hear your laugh in echoes, your energy in silence, your essence in everything that falls short of you. And yet they can't call you. They can't reach you because they know, intuitively, undeniably, that the bridge they burned doesn't rebuild itself. This is the power of becoming the ghost they can't escape. You're not chained to their guilt. You're not waiting on their remorse. You've become the unspoken lesson they carry, the unresolved truth they revisit when the distractions fade. Their pride may never admit it, but their soul knows. It knows that love like yours doesn't cycle back. That presence like yours doesn't double as an option. And so now, they wander, not through the world, but through the memory of you, trying to trace the moment they lost you, trying to rewrite an ending that already closed. But Stoicism doesn't entertain what could have been. It stands in what is. And what is, right now, is that you've risen past the need to be acknowledged. Your validation is not a gift they can take from you. It's a mirror you now hold, to yourself clear and untarnished. They cannot escape you, not because you linger, but because you no longer do. That's the paradox they now face. The more they try to forget you, the more they remember. The more they deny your impact, the more it defines their quiet moments. You were not a phase, you were a force. And now that force has become a ghost that speaks through the emptiness they never thought would follow. You are not vengeful. You are not watching from the shadows. You are simply gone. And your absence is louder than your presence ever needed to be. The beauty of Stoic relationships is that we walk away with honor. We don't burn down the house, we simply stop living in it. And as it crumbles from the neglect of the one who abandoned it, they begin to realize what they had. Not because we told them, not because we made them feel guilty, but because silence has a way of telling the truth that noise never can. They walk through their life believing they've moved on until a song plays and it's your voice they hear. Until a scent drifts past and it's your warmth they feel. Until they sit across from someone new and it's your soul they search for behind unfamiliar eyes. That's the ghost they can't shake. Not because you haunt them, but because you healed yourself so completely that your absence became sacred. It became holy, and no temporary affection can touch that. They tried to forget you, and in doing so, they memorized you, every detail, every moment, every mistake. That's the storm they now weather, not because you caused it, but because they did. They thought they were walking away from someone waiting. They didn't know they were leaving behind a memory that would outlast their distractions. And now, as they stand in the ruins of what they abandoned, they will feel it, that heavy, lingering ache, the one that whispers, "You were never ordinary. You were always the moment, and now you're the lesson, one they can't escape, one they can't replace, one they'll carry in silence for the rest of their lives." 4. The priceless treasure they threw away. There's something profoundly tragic about taking something valuable for granted, about looking into the face of gold and seeing dust. Yet that's exactly what happens when someone underestimates a soul that was rare, generous, consistent. They didn't leave because they stopped needing you. They left because they assumed you'd always be available, accessible, waiting. In that assumption, they devalued what they had. They misread your presence as permanence, your loyalty as limitation. And now, only in hindsight, do they begin to grasp the cost of what they lost. They thought you were replaceable. That's the story they told themselves to justify their choices. They walked away thinking life would hand them another you, someone who would show up the same way, love with the same intensity, forgive with the same grace. But life doesn't work like that. Love doesn't recycle itself. Connections that deep aren't found, they're forged, and once broken, they rarely reform. You were the treasure they mishandled, and now that loss has turned sacred. They may have left casually, but the weight of your absence will follow them with increasing pressure. Why? Because the kind of love you gave was priceless. Not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was real. It was consistent. It was there when they didn't even realize they needed it. And now that it's gone, they're starting to realize what they never bothered to see. The truth is, people only search for treasure after they've buried it too deep to recover. You didn't vanish to punish. You vanished to protect. To protect your peace, your worth, your future. In Stoicism, we're taught not to cry over what is lost, but to accept it as part of the turning of the wheel of fortune. You are not clinging to the past anymore. You are not mourning the version of them who once held you close. That version is gone. What remains is the lesson. And the lesson is this: not everyone who walks with you deserves to hold space in your life forever. Some are just there to test the boundaries of your self-worth, to mirror back what you're willing to tolerate. They were your mirror, and now that mirror is cracked, distorted, no longer a reflection of the love you know you're capable of giving or receiving. They once believed they were choosing freedom when they chose to leave. What they didn't realize was that freedom isn't the absence of responsibility. It's the presence of something meaningful, and what they ran toward didn't offer that. It offered distractions, comfort, novelty, but not depth, not soul, not you. They didn't just walk away from a relationship, they walked away from a sanctuary. And sanctuaries, once abandoned, rarely reopen, because what makes something priceless is not how long it lasts, but how deeply it touches. And you touched them in ways they didn't have the maturity to acknowledge, in ways they didn't have the courage to honor. That's not on you. That's never been your failure. That's the lesson they must now live with. You were never asking for too much. You were offering more than they were ready to receive. That's why they dropped you. That's why they minimized you. Because to admit your value would have forced them to confront their inadequacy. And they weren't ready. Now, as they sift through replicas and rehearse memories, they'll keep returning to the truth. You were the real thing. The one who stayed when others left, the one who listened when no one else did, the one who believed in them when they didn't even believe in themselves, and they threw that away. Why? Because they assumed they'd find it again. But Stoic relationships are rare because they are built not on desire, but on discipline, on character, on depth, and that depth, it's what they miss most now. The shallow doesn't satisfy once you've tasted depth. The temporary doesn't feel like home after you've lived in presence. And now they wander, not just through new connections, but through the rubble of their own decisions. They see glimpses of you in others, but can't reach the essence that once felt so natural. They try to fill the void with attention, with movement, with noise, but the silence always returns. Because you weren't just a person in their life, you were the compass. You were the grounding, the warmth, and now all they feel is cold. This isn't about revenge, it's about truth. You've risen above the wreckage, not because you forgot them, but because you remembered yourself. You remembered who you were. Before you made them the center of your orbit, you remembered that your love wasn't a transaction. It was a gift, one they didn't know how to receive, and now they don't know how to live without. Their regret doesn't need to be loud, to be real. It lingers in their hesitation, in their inability to bond deeply again, in their late-night questions and quiet longings. They may not reach out. Their pride might be louder than their grief, but grief doesn't need an audience. It just needs silence, and in that silence, they are haunted by everything you were, everything they didn't protect, everything they won't find again. They used to believe they could walk away from you and still hold on to their pride. But what is pride when it stands alone, staring at the echo of a love it destroyed? What is pride when it becomes a wall between what you need and what you lost? You don't need their apology. You don't need their return. What you needed was to wake up, and you did. Now they're the one dreaming of what they let slip through their fingers. You were never meant to be held by someone who only knew how to grasp, not to cherish. So now you shine alone, untouched, elevated, priceless. If this resonated with your journey, like this video and comment number 1 below. Subscribe now to stay connected with content that lifts you into your highest self. This is just the beginning of your power rising. 5. The mirror of regret. There is a peculiar kind of pain that doesn't come from heartbreak or betrayal, but from the unshakable awareness that you were the one who let go of something real, something rare, something you can never recreate. That is the torment of the mirror. It doesn't scream, it doesn't punish, it simply reflects. It reflects the truth that was once ignored, denied, or dismissed. And now, the person who once thought they held the upper hand finds themselves staring into their own reflection, not with pride, but with a gnawing sense of regret that grows louder in silence. The mirror does not lie. It shows them not who they pretend to be, but who they truly are. The one who turned away from a love that was offered without condition. The one who chose distance when presence was needed. The one who made you question your worth when they should have been affirming it. At first, they might have celebrated their freedom. They might have smiled at the illusion of release, posted photos of their so-called peace, surrounded themselves with noise and novelty. But the mirror was waiting, not in anger, in patience. It waited for the distractions to fade, for the crowd to disperse, for the lights to dim. And when that happened, as it always does, they were left with only themselves. That's when the mirror spoke. It didn't say, "You were wrong." It said, "Look at what you lost." It doesn't just reflect the past, it magnifies the cost. And the cost, when weighed against the cheapness of their excuses, is unbearable, because regret is the echo of choices made in blindness. It is the weight of knowing you once held a masterpiece and treated it like a placeholder. You see, they never thought you'd leave. Not really. They thought you'd bend, adjust, forgive, return. They thought you were the kind who stays loyal, no matter the damage. But Stoicism taught you something different. It taught you self-respect. It taught you that being whole is more important than being held, that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's sacred. And now, as you stand in that sacred stillness, they are left to confront the person they became in your absence. Not a hero, not a survivor, but the one who let go. And that image, that truth, is what breaks them, because it cannot be undone. You weren't just another chapter. You were the turning point. The moment in their story where everything could have shifted but didn't, because they were too proud, too distracted, too afraid to go deeper. And now they revisit that chapter, hoping to rewrite it, but finding only the ink of finality. The door is closed, not slammed but sealed. They peer through the window of memory and see a version of you they can no longer reach. One that glows with healing, one that no longer waits, one that no longer needs to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. That's what the mirror shows them. Not your face, but your absence. Not your voice, but the silence where your laughter used to live. Not your hand, but the emptiness where warmth used to be. And in those moments when they are honest, they admit what they won't say aloud, that letting you go was the greatest mistake they ever made. They thought they were strong. But strength isn't found in leaving, it's found in staying. It's found in growing, in listening, in choosing someone over and over again. And they didn't choose you, not when it counted. So now, the mirror becomes their companion. It follows them into relationships where they try to replicate your energy, into conversations where they find themselves comparing every response to yours, into dreams where your presence visits without warning. They may not speak your name, but it's there, in the sigh, in the silence, in the way their eyes shift when something familiar passes by. Regret isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quietest thing in the room. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control how others remember us. We can only control how we carry ourselves in the face of being forgotten. You carried yourself with grace. You didn't burn bridges, you didn't beg. You walked away not because you wanted them to hurt, but because you needed to heal. And that walk, that's what they remember. Not the goodbye, but the dignity, the stillness, the peace. That's what the mirror shows them now. The one who didn't need revenge, the one who didn't need to scream, the one who simply left and never looked back. You are not their guilt trip. You are their ghost of growth, the one they revisit not because they miss the comfort, but because they miss the clarity. With you, they saw themselves reflected in the best light, and now all they see is the shadow. That is the power of walking away with integrity. That is the strength Stoic relationships cultivate, not in domination, but in detachment. You are no longer entangled in their confusion. You are no longer defined by their indecision. You are defined by your own rebirth. And in that rebirth, they are the ones standing still, watching your light fade into a horizon they cannot reach. The mirror becomes a portal, a painful reminder of the door they closed, the chance they squandered, the treasure they threw away. It shows them not what they have, but what they'll never have again. And that realization, it doesn't scream, it doesn't rage, it simply reflects again and again and again. 6. You were the storm, not the wreckage. They thought the storm was over when you walked away. They mistook your silence for surrender, your stillness for weakness. But what they failed to understand is that you weren't the wreckage left behind. You were the force that cleared the path for transformation. You weren't the one who broke. You were the one who burned. You were fire, not ashes. In Stoicism, we learn that chaos doesn't define us. Our response to it does. And while they assumed you'd crumble, you were quietly rebuilding. You weren't begging for return. You weren't waiting in ruins. You were rising. You were evolving. You were doing the one thing they never expected, thriving without them. That's what makes you the storm, not the destruction, but the renewal, not the noise, but the power. They expected aftermath. What they got was awakening, because you didn't just survive what they did, you became something stronger because of it. You became unmoved. You became focused. You became intentional. While they sought validation through external distractions, you cultivated inner peace. And that peace, that's the real disruption. That's the storm they can't explain. That's what shakes them, because it means their departure didn't damage you. It freed you. You were never theirs to destroy. You were always yours to discover. And now that you have, your presence carries a gravity they can feel but no longer reach. They watch from the sidelines now, and it hurts. It hurts because you are no longer reactive. You are no longer caught in the tug-of-war of their affection. You've let go of the rope, and when there's nothing left to pull, they lose their control. You were the storm they thought they could outlast, but storms don't wait. Storms move on, and when they do, they change everything. You didn't just leave, you left them to face themselves, and that's what they fear most. Not your anger, not your silence, but the version of themselves that was never strong enough to stand beside you. They thought they were the ones ending things, but you were the one ending the cycle. And now the cycle is closed, final, complete. You aren't circling back. You aren't giving second chances to those who fumbled the first. That's the difference between forgiveness and access. Stoic relationships don't repeat the past. They learn from it. They don't entertain familiar pain. They transcend it, and you've transcended. You've become the storm that clarified what was real and what was distraction. You've become the reckoning they didn't prepare for, the quiet consequence of choices made without thought, without care. And now, as they sift through the pieces, they start to understand. You weren't their lesson, you were their loss. And losses like you don't come twice. They'll try to find you in others. They'll try to recreate the feeling. But replicas never hold the same weight. They don't burn the same. They don't shake the ground. Because you weren't just someone they once knew. You were the turning point. The storm that revealed the truth. The force that ended their illusion of control. And no matter how many masks they wear now, no matter how well they pretend, the memory of who you were and how you walked away will echo through everything they do. They'll deny it, they'll bury it, but it will rise in quiet moments, in familiar places, in dreams they don't speak of. You will return, not physically, but in the form of reflection, of regret, of revelation. And that return will be their reckoning. You don't need to prove anything. Your life now is the proof. Your peace is the proof. Your elevation is the storm that keeps building silently, steadily, beautifully, because you've realized that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means becoming, and you have become the version of yourself they never believed you'd reach, the version they can no longer touch. You are not defined by their inability to love you. You are defined by the decision to love yourself enough to leave. You were never the one abandoned. You were the one released. And that freedom has made you unstoppable. So if this storm inside you has begun to settle into clarity, like this video and comment number 1 to let the world know your power isn't in what you lost, it's in what you reclaimed. Subscribe now and stay with us, because this journey into stoicism and self-mastery is far from over. We're just getting started. So here you are, not broken, not forgotten, but awakened. There's something fierce about a person who no longer seeks validation, something unshakable about someone who has stopped asking, why did they leave? And instead whispers, why did I ever stay? That shift is more than healing, it's rebirth. You've walked through silence, stared down absence, erased the names that once tethered your heart to pain. And now, what remains is a kind of clarity they never wanted you to find. That you never needed closure, you only needed truth. That you never needed them to remember you, you only needed to remember yourself. You didn't lose a relationship, you shed a version of yourself that settled, that doubted, that believed love meant holding on instead of letting go. Now you carry your worth not like a secret, but like a flame, quiet, steady, untouchable. In this transformation, stoicism isn't just philosophy, it's practice. It's the art of standing still while the world demands your reaction. It's the discipline of choosing growth over chaos, peace over proof. This journey hasn't just taught you how to let go of someone. It's shown you how to hold on to yourself. Because the power you've stepped into isn't about being above them. It's about no longer being beneath yourself. You are the silence they never expected, the storm they misread, the ghost they can't shake, the treasure they threw away, the mirror they avoid, and the indifference they can't ignore. You're not just moving on, you've transcended. And by the time they recognize what they lost, you'll be so far ahead, they won't even know how to begin chasing. You've entered the next chapter, not written in desperation, but in dignity. Not centered on their return, but on your rise. This is not the end of your story. This is the first breath of a life that will no longer be defined by who couldn't see your worth. And if you feel that truth stirring inside you, if something powerful and quiet has awakened, you already know you were never forgotten. You were just getting ready to remember who you've been all along. Welcome to the life they never imagined you could live without them, and the life you now know. You never needed them to begin.